Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the very first of the officially named Arnie's Poetry Cafe. I'm Paula Lyons, Arnie's widow, and I know that Arnie would be thrilled to know that these nights are going to continue, and delighted to have his name attached. I'm not reading a poem from Arnie tonight. I'm reading a poem from one of our summer poets, Liz Posen, a great supporter of the Playhouse, and it's got a sentiment I just adore. She sent it to me right after Arnie died, and it's called Trying to Understand by Liz Posen. Disgusted by the destruction of our planet, enraged by the lying greed of the politicians, heartsick for the refugees, unwanted and afraid, God needs a respite, some levity, a neat turn of phrase, an infectious laugh, reminders that pleasure is possible, and acts of kindness and compassion exist. Thus, in the middle of the night, God called Arnie and seats him right to the right. And so the conversation begins. Thank you. I'm now going to turn the podium over to our guest, host for the evening, island poet Michael West.
I'm truly honored to be here to celebrate Arnie, to inaugurate the Arnie's Poetry Cafe, so brilliantly introduced by Paula in that poem. And I'm just going to do a short poem, a haiku, and then introduce our first poet reader. The pond is never still. A water strider stretches the mirror surface. Jill Jupin, who is our first reader, grew up in the Northeast Kingdom of Vermont and has lived on the island for 22 years. Her chapbook, The Space Between, was published by Plan B Press in 2019. She's a Pushcart Prize nominee. She will begin her fourth year as Martha's Vineyard Poet Laureate in April. Jill Jupin.
Hi. Glad to be here. And take off my mask. There's too many things to do these days. This first poem is called It Was a Very Successful Bombing. They say Euripides was torn apart by wild dogs, Aeschylus killed by the mother of all tortoises, dropped by an eagle onto his bald pate. The Greeks were sure the fox knew many things, but the hedgehog knew only one big thing. We are all traveling toward death at our own pace. The fox is crafty, keen, and sharp. The hedgehog knows enough to get out of the way. Tears make your eyes sparkle, much like a broken pomegranate is full of stars. If we listen beyond the bombing, there is a star created out of a cluster of shattered diamonds that sends out a musical signal. Listen to it, to the breath of the world. Listen, we are bombing this world, this one world. And I will read, I think one Vermont poem. Crows gather each morning like Cambodian elders. Early each morning, the crows gather around and take turns cawing at each other, like Cambodian refugees used to gather in a tiny Vermont village, squatting in a semicircle, cawing loudly in turn, discussing the state of their world, perhaps, or the difficulty of raising chickens in a government-sponsored apartment while living with small children and old grandmothers, everyone talking at once. This poem is My Love is a Freudian Analyst. When I returned from my dream of dying, I was unclear whether time enough had been spent living. Unfortunate to have woken so soon. A confusion, certainly, there in the dark of my bedroom. Should 3 dogs in this bed, molded to the shape of my body and love, be enough? I have never been seized by joy, gloried in the redness of the rising sun. Instead, I have lacked the strength to pull myself through the days. I have wished for such dreams not to flee like cockroaches in the night. Tonight, I will dream of a person lost, posters of a face stapled to telephone poles, their torn corners caught by a breeze, all of them trying to blow away. Lightning. Across the field, shrouded with clover, the cow lies. On her back, bloated, blue. For days she has lain near the black walnut, rare and strong. 4 splayed legs pointing at the white blank sky. I know this place where she lies, the people who own these red, ringing raspberries of summer. This is a poem for the poet Tony Hoagland. Fight. You were still alive on National Talk Like a Pirate Day and chose a blue bandana to tie around your bald head. Ahoy, you whispered to the friends who visited. You'd been stringing beads for weeks, handing them out by the fistful. A celebration is a celebration after all. Acceptance is acceptance after many months of barely living. Letters to old friends weren't mailed. The sound of paper tearing. The poem stopped. The Mall of America, wind chimes, poor Britney Spears. What a road trip with burgers and bar fights. We had reason to be afraid. You missed National Toothbrushing Day by 9 days, but I thought of you, that big toothy smile, all that life I could hardly look at for its brightness. Little Sleeper. One barely notices the flakes of snow when they begin, the quiet dance, just the beginning, hardly enough to quench the thirst of the sparrow, sleeping on the branch of the naked, twisted tree, head tucked under her brown wing. Pastoral. When the roof's shadow on a pale afternoon reaches to cover the cornflower, the Queen Anne's lace, it's August in the fields. The winter oats begin their struggle. I take time for myself like a thief. The rain came last night at dusk. The gray, sleety air of December smells like aluminum. The chill wraps like bruised rain around each tree and pole. The west windows glaze with it. I walk down to the bucking sea to catch the awful embrace like a lover. The space between. This entire day I have felt just a few seconds separated from myself. Stepping outside, I close the door upon my foot. The glass on the table is moments away from the water I pour. I speak words that sound foreign even to me, said too early or perhaps too late. The tenderness I thought I felt is gone before my hand ever reaches your arm. The condition of being. I've become a column of air blowing down the road of empty consequences. It's merely a means of entering a space. I become frightened of what I know. Each day seems slightly altered. There is an absolute gap between pain and absence of pain. I can't be more than this or less so. Let's settle here, you and I. Stop endlessly turning away. Stay with me, listen. All the rain, all at once, like small silver nuggets dropping around us. You should have heard what I saw. Fly away, little pretty bird. I have a habit of using unattributed pronouns, which can confuse the listener. Most people don't mind. The subject is usually of no interest to them anyway. You could say I am a listener, drawing people like squirrels to my park bench. It's amazing what people will tell me. Such are the needs of desperation. I silently nod my head while cartoon bluebirds fly around me, sewing up my mouth with a pink ribbon, tying it in a lovely bow. When you left, the warmth of summer day by day exhales. Not a leaf on the old tree. The branches huddle closer together. Above the stony fields, the wind brushes the cold on the sky, while the months of winter are stamping the floors of their stalls. And the remainder of the roses splash like a crime across the peeling fence. The field. It is not the now, I tell you. It is the past I cannot run from. The past of a child who had no past until that day. I ran, had to run from the man, tall, thin as the hay in the field where I ran, and he, I could not take the time to look, ran loping behind me, until his long arms reached out and took me there. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jill. That was beautiful. And I have another short poem before I introduce our next poet. This one is also a haiku. Dark morning sky, white silk clouds swirling, veil a crescent moon. Well, well. We're honored to have here tonight Ron Slate, who is the editor and publisher of On the Seawall, an online literary and arts magazine. His third book of poems, Joyride, will be published in 2023 by Carnegie Mellon University Press, and he is also the Master of Ceremonies for Pathways Tuesday night poetry readings. And so I think you will be happy to welcome next to the podium, Ron Slate.
It's very good to be with everybody in this building. I'm going to read 4 poems. And the first one is called Aground. And it concerns the grounding of a fishing boat on Lobsterville Beach back in 2020. The boat was called Miss Jenna, and I have changed the name of the boat in order to protect the guilty. Aground. The paths pinched off. The ventures I prepared for but did not pursue. Students learned from others. Jobs were filled by others. Trains departed without me. I prized hooks from fish because none were the elusive bass. We told stories that evening, old friends of former lives, getting reacquainted with the gaps between us. Many recollections with whiskey breath of all the lettings go, then to bed. In the morning there was news. The radio tuned to the local station. Miss Renata, a 49-foot conch boat, had run aground on Lobsterville Beach while we slept. The captain slumped at the wheel, his mate drunk down below deck. Nobody here eats conch. Today they would have unloaded their haul in New Bedford for processing. Then the frozen whelk would have steamed to Quan Chau. None of us on the ridge above the beach woke to the air klaxon of the Coast Guard, multiple hails that failed to rouse the captain. We were dreaming. The usual route of the Miss Renata. The captain, knowing the currents, distances, and shoals, was he oppressed by his certainties? The beer bottles clanked as the ship rolled. He cut himself off from his destination. That afternoon I went to the dump, where the talk was about irresponsibility, folly. They towed the vessel to the harbor, then revoked the captain's docking privileges. He told the Gazette, to be honest, it's pretty embarrassing. At that moment, how could he entrust himself to anything? The sounds resonated for everyone but him. The scrape of the keel on the stony bottom, the shouts of those trying to make things right, make an arrest, make the foolish pay for the exertion of the law at 4 a.m. The last time I heard Arnie Reisman read, not on Zoom, but live, was at the West Tisbury Library, and he was talking about a screenplay he wrote about Miles Connor, the art thief. And there's a connection to me there. I grew up, or I lived for almost 40 years in Milton, Massachusetts, where Miles was from. His father was a Milton cop, and Miles robbed the bank successfully in the town of Milton, even while his dad was a cop. But the one thing about Miles that people don't know is that he was also a local rock and roll star through New England. And when I was a kid, 13, 14, 15 years old, the only thing I wanted to do in my life was to be a drummer in Miles's band. So we would hang out at the Beachcomber at Wollaston Beach. We were too young to get in, just to hear the music and to see him in his leather jacket and so forth. It was his band. So this poem is called Stop Time, which is a drummer's notation on a musical chart. I really don't have to explain what it is, but it'll come up in the poem. Stop Time. Frank McCabe bought on credit at my dad's liquor store. They had gone to school together. Finally, my father said, "Teach my son to play drums and we're even, for now." Late afternoon lessons in his cellar. First the basics, wrapped out on rubber pads. Then rolls, drags, flams, paradiddles, and ratomacues. Moving on to a real kit and the flair of fills, underbelly routines of the bass and flights between cymbals, crash and sizzle. While I practiced, he scribbled on charts for his quartet. Thursdays at the Naughty Pine and weddings on weekends. No lessons for most of the summer after his heart attack. Autumn rain, water seeping up between linoleum tiles, staining the peeling baseboards. Mold and mildew, backbeat and double time. Smoker's cough and drinker's nose. Soon he set up his kit next to mine, laying out the opening bars from this moment on. And I'd play inside him. That's how he put it. Stay inside me and listen with your wrists. When Mrs. McCabe came down to say they caught the man who killed the president, he dropped the needle on Opus 1 and said, "Play." We listened to Krupa's rockin' chair and Buddy Rich's big band doing time check. Lying on their sides, quarts of bourbon behind cans of dried paint. You don't wiggle, pivot, or rock your feet on the pedals. Speed comes from control. You don't keep time, you make time. The standards, renowned, yet open to reinvention, thus eternal. But I lived inside a body. Mrs. McCabe returned from the hospital with no breasts. A week later, she was playing piano upstairs while Frank critiqued me. "Don't play with your whole arm. It looks cool, but it isn't." He lit a Winston. "Don't be like a bass player. Use deodorant." He never let a wimp carry your gear. Listen carefully to the songs you hate the most. Verse and chorus, shuffle, bridge, fill, drag, fill, stop time, ghost note. Rumble of the sagging boiler, steam knocking the pipes. Soon you won't have to remember. You'll just make the noise. Well, I never did become a drummer. But I do have another connection to Miles Connor and Arnie in a way, having to do with stolen art, and there was some in my family, and that's what this prose poem is about. It's called "The Utrillo is Lost Forever," and Utrillo is Maurice Utrillo, the late French impressionist. The Utrillo is lost forever. Sasha entrusted the painting to a colleague at Paris Vogue. In 1939, at age 18, she had been hired by an illustrator. When she and our family returned from Sardin after hiding from the Germans in the Vichy for 5 years, the painting was gone. Utrillo had given it to her just before the war. By then, he was too infirm to paint en plein air. He would gaze out his windows and paint what he saw or create from postcards or photographs of Paris streets. He had given up drinking, become religious, and married. Sasha's Lost Utrillo was a painting of the triangular 5-story building where Eric Satie had lived in Arcueil. There have been rumors of the artwork's appearance in Rubliovka and Abu Dhabi. Wherever there are billionaires, there is art. A disgruntled servant, blackmail, collapse of an estate due to a sudden change of fortune, news of missing art gets out. Utrillo's mother was Suzanne Valadon, a model in great demand, then a painter. Maybe Renoir or Degas was Utrillo's father. To have this succession of lovers was madness itself, she wrote in her memoir. She made a famous painting of Satie in 1892 when she was 27 years old. I went to Paris for the first time in 1966 and stayed with Sasha in Auteuil for a month. Then we took the train to Locarno on my 16th birthday. She was my mother's first cousin, 29 years older than I. She had lustrous dark hair, a beauty mark beside her chin, smoked with a cigarette holder, spoke with the family's Russo-French accent but with a slight lisp, and liked to spend mornings in her long robe drinking coffee and sketching. There is a pen and ink drawing of me reading a newspaper. Sasha mentioned the trio many times, without rancor for the colleague at Vogue who had no explanation for the painting's disappearance. It had been taken to his family's house in Brittany, and one could not have imagined or envisioned the fighting and destruction that occurred there in 1944. About her pregnancy, Suzanne Valadon recalled her friend Adele saying, "He should have used a goatskin on his cock." The boy grew up with seizures, was often beaten by her lovers, and became a drunk by age 18. Sasha took me to see Satie's building. To this day, my cousins enjoy teasing me. They ask, "Where else did she take you? What else did you learn about art?" And finally, I'm going to read a poem from my first book. It's called The Demise of Camembert, and I'm going to read it because I'm thinking about my mother, who is quite elderly and going through a real tough spot right now. I'm responsible for her care. The Demise of Camembert. I remember my mother squeezing the camembert. She bought it 5 days before unwrapping it, unwrapped it 2 hours before she served it. But what the French sociologist calls the destruction of family meals means there's no more patience for ripening on the cold shelf. This message comes to us on a tray with quick-serve cheddar puffs, passed across the cocktail party, across news networks via satellite. It also lands thudding with the flatbread, bean salad, raisins, fruit bar, seedless jam, and plastic cutlery in the humanitarian airdrop. Pah! A man rejects the bland cheese couplets and the pre-moistened serviette. In this world, he fears annihilation. This world has made him a nihilist. Now he sits on a bed, on the bedspread in a motel on the edge of Las Vegas, or a hotel near Narita Airport, eating an engineered salty snack, planning deaths designed his way, getting more and more thirsty. So hear me. Compassion begins in the pasture. Adoration of cow breed, grass strain, the certain season for milking, the way the curd is cut and pressed and salted and cured and shaped, the time and temperature at each stage. The marketing man from Coeur de Lion, the #1 brand of Camembert, is revising the resume of his ripe life. And you and I, paring away the rind. Do you and I have a patient nose for the creamy inwardness of things? Thank you for listening.
Was here somewhere. There we go. All cleaned. Thanks so much, Ron. The wit is just, devastating. I will take off my mask. And you mentioned Arnie's fascination with the Gardner Museum theft and that whole video thing. And you mentioned Miles Connor as being somebody that you were intrigued with, and he was a suspect for many years and so forth. In my book, Dutch Reckoning, also about the Gardner Museum theft, I have a character who is Miles Connor, but his name is Yards Malloy. Not Miles, but Yards. Anyway. We're fortunate to have as our next reader Sean Williams, whose work is extremely evocative, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy it. Before I bring her up here, I just have one final haiku to share with you. The praying mantis copulates, then eats her mate. Nothing personal.
I'm going to read some older poems and some newer poems. And the first one I'm going to read tonight is called The Dance. Hot pink stretch pants. I was 12. Mum said, "You'll never wear them," but bought them for me anyway. I begged and pleaded, those pants I needed. I was 12 and thin, dying to sin, too young, too skinny to fill those pants. I was going to the dance, or disco as we called it then, back when we danced in lines and kissed boys in the hall, not yet tall. Empty cups, furtive looks. I wore those pants, or they wore me. Thought I looked like Sandy, would make the boys randy. But I stood scared in the hall at Lower Park School. Felt like a fool. The boys did not drool at me. They liked Sharon and Karen and Tracy, wouldn't chase me. Walked home with Suzanne. Behind me there were boys, all bravado and noise. They laughed at me in my shiny pink pants, coming home from the dance. How was it? Said Mum. Did you have fun? I ran up the stairs. It just wasn't fair. Pulled off those pants, stashed them, hid them, glad to be rid of them. Basking in light. When my heart yearns for what I've lost, I sit and see what I have got. The notion of have it all has washed away and watched me fall. I landed here upon this dune, whose sands my whittled heart has hewn. And this one's more current. It's called The Lady of Covidia. I'm here to get rid of you. Most of you I don't make sick, but I have a better way that's quick. Days and days home alone, tight quarters with your family clones, a gnawing sense of fear and dread, thoughts run amok inside your head, an open vein for net fix, the things for which you used to wish. Peace and quiet, solitude, calm, enjoyed in excess, can do you harm. You're worried life will pass you by. This is your life, each tear, each sigh. The little things. I couldn't see the forest for the trees. They were almost naked and surrounded my house like so many discarded memories. Stark branches reached out like arthritic hands. Birds left for somewhere warm. The leaves sodden with grief were a reminder of all the unfinished business. I did not have the heart to rake. I took to my bed, buried myself, and slept. There was a drought, a love famine. I put myself to bed each night in a bedroom as cold as a tomb. My heart had been exhumed and found wanting, left to wither. Today I watched you blow the leaves, and my garden, not yet put to bed, was tidy, restored to order. I followed you down to the basement. Cobwebs brushed your face. You turned off my outside shower. Upstairs the dogs gathered around your ankles. My old girl leaned against you as if she were an extension of me, trusting you. I tried to distract you from working, a woman's wiles, but you were strictly business and left with just a kiss. In the morning I will wake with your arms wrapped around me as if I am precious. And then these next couple of poems are from my book. This one's called All is Fair in Love and War. The twisted path, the gnarly tree, followed you down to the sea. 'Twas years before we lingered here, when your heart I held so dear. I looked upon your tree-like neck, a column of strength, I took a breath. In my hand I held a dagger, wanted to impede your swagger. Where long ago I carved your name on beetle bung of island fame, we lay upon the ice-stone bench, made love my hair you clenched. How can love or war be fair? I raised my hand, did I dare? Then I awoke, stretched and sighed, rolled out of bed, forgot to cry. 2 bluebirds sat upon a branch, they bickered and pecked, their passion waned, desire gone, love had left, yet the war raged on. Best friend. I talked to you last night, late, and I realized that you are my best friend, the only one who knows where my secrets end and the lies begin, the ones I wrap around the public like a gauze scarf, see-through, but not you. It takes years to find. We have been unkind, dished the dirt, made it hurt. You know me inside out and see my wealth, my poignant poverty, been lost with me. You dare say it, others can't convey it. They have not shared my pain or lain with me. The maturing sounds boring, drunken debauchery, an unmade bed, half dead, fights and drama, babies then, and somewhat calmer. Growing years, falling, crying, rising, dying, apart now, severed, grey-haired, weathered. I call for you, the one who knows, me. I don't have to pretend. Shattered hearts do mend, my best friend. And this is a kind of a whimsical little thing. It's called Fairy. I want to be a fairy and live amongst the elves, drink dandelion tea from foxgloves, wear petals, leaves and shells, make daisy chains and melodies with pixies, unicorns and gnomes. I'm done with work and paying bills, in Hobbitland I roam. I will hum with hummingbirds and fly with dragonflies. I'll sing with birds of paradise, let my heart be wide and open, take a trip to fairyland, concoct a magic potion, dip my toes into a glistening lake, and make believe I will not wake. Sorry. Secrets. So I'm only as sick as my secrets, those gems I cannot divulge, only as sick as my secrets, the ones that may leave you cold, chilled by the dark subject matter, shocked by the depth of the well, where the black eels lurk, the pain and the hurt, and fear and misery dwell. Things that I did as a child, when butter would not melt in my mouth, rode horses bareback in the wild, let my morals and clothing go south. Stuff that happened while my mother worked in the little 2-up, 2-down house, add water to whiskey while the boys got frisky, smoking and dancing in an unbuttoned blouse. Running away and hitchhiking, taking rides across country in trucks, with dubious men as old as my dad who wanted only a schoolgirl to fuck. Stealing and stuffing the stash, doing drugs, getting wasted, hiding bottles in trash, disguising myself in the closet, playing truant, in the language of lies I was fluent. Broke into houses, lit fires, was wanton and full of desire, but knew when to hide it, how to disguise it, when it was time to confide it. The secrets became darker and deeper, as a woman, a wife, and a mother. How long might it take to discover the skeletons that lurked under cover? I became sicker and sicker, death would be quicker than to unburden, reveal what I strove to conceal. I stripped off the layers, laid down my sword, made amends where I could, and gave you my word. It is painful and cruel, this almighty duel. You battle and moan, yet you're not alone. Each has their secret, their sin they have cloaked, regret that they didn't, scared that they won't. Are you sick with your secret? Get better, don't keep it. And then one last poem called Surrender. Let go, let God, they told me, as I held on with all my might, clung to your hand, even as your grip lessened, could not let go. Stood watchful by the window, waited for you, as a widow at the walk. I just want to talk, I said, as I stripped and whipped your back with my words. They fell unheard, as you peeled away without looking back. You were my crack, my bad habit, like an addict I craved, willed you to cave into my needs. My heart did bleed, stabbed by my own hand, expectation and demands. Then I am aloof when you want me, or love me more. There's something about your desperation I deplore. I let go, you hold on, the nature of the game, food for the insane. I learned slowly, like a dim-witted child, that my wild, grasping, clutching, holding was lack of love for myself, dubious mental health based on low self-esteem, and I leaned hard on men. They were the bricks and mortar, my supporters, so unfair to them, to me, the gravity of my soul, too heavy, out of control. Until I let go. The dreams of falling end, my heart and soul, they heal, I mend.
Thanks, Sean. That was wonderful. Sean Williams is a year-round Islander for the past 32 years, an avid writer who has published a book of poetry. Is that Gold Dust Woman?
Yeah.
Gold Dust Woman. And I've seen a copy at Kronik's. I don't know where else, maybe in the...
Used to be at the bookstore, but they're not anymore. Now it got small.
Yeah, I think there is a copy in Kronik's, though. She has 2 unpublished novels that she's working on, and she lives in the woods of West Tisbury. Certainly a lot of fun. Thanks, Sean, for that reading. And thanks to Paula Lyons, to Jill Jupin, and to Ron Slate for their fine poems this evening. You'll find this video on the Playhouse website in a few days, probably by the weekend. I'm not sure. Someday soon. And next month, we'll have another Arnie's Poetry Cafe. This will be hosted by Clark Myers. So for tonight and for the poets who read tonight, I'd like to sign off now and say thank you very much for attending. Bye-bye.